It was just another regular morning at a high-end retail store in the middle of the city. The store had large glass windows that allowed sunlight to pour in, illuminating the carefully organized shelves full of designer items. People casually walked through the aisles, some looking for the latest fashion trends, while others were just browsing, enjoying the atmosphere. The store's polished wooden floors creaked quietly under the footsteps of customers. A black man, dressed in a simple yet clean outfit, walked in through the door. His jeans were well fitted, and he wore a plain t-shirt, carrying himself with confidence but blending easily into the store's calm atmosphere. He wasn't acting out of the ordinary, just walking around as many other shoppers did, exploring the rows of clothing and accessories. His calm demeanor didn't give any indication of the trouble that was about to unfold. He picked up a few items, holding them up to the light to examine the quality, moving from one section of the store to the next. He wasn't in a rush, nor did he seem distracted, but there was a particular item he had his eye on. As he continued down the aisles, Karen, a woman shopping nearby, noticed him out of the corner of her eye. She stood in the cosmetics section, examining a brand of perfume, but her attention kept drifting toward the black man. She glanced at him a few times, noticing how casually he was dressed compared to some of the other customers. Her mind began to make assumptions. She couldn't help herself. She started thinking that maybe he didn't belong in the store. She wasn't sure why she felt this way, but something about his appearance just didn't seem to fit with the brand of the store. Her thoughts became more focused on him. Why would someone like him be shopping here? Was he really here to buy something, or was he up to something else? Karen shifted uncomfortably, her eyes still following him around the store. As she watched him move down the aisles, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He didn't seem to be stealing, but Karen couldn't quiet the voice in her head telling her to be suspicious. She wasn't sure exactly what she expected to happen, but there was a strange feeling in her gut. Maybe he was pretending to shop just to blend in. Maybe he was going to grab something and run. Her heart raced slightly as she observed him. She couldn't stand the thought of being wrong, but she couldn't ignore the unease in her chest. Without thinking much more, Karen made up her mind. She was going to alert security. It wasn't right to let someone like him wander around without any attention. With her mind set, she began to move toward the front of the store, looking for someone to talk to, her steps quickening with determination. She was convinced that she had to do something before it was too late. Her actions, driven by suspicion, were about to change the course of this ordinary day. But neither Karen nor the black man could have imagined how this simple decision would unfold. It was just a momentary feeling, one based on assumptions that she hadn't fully thought through, but it would soon lead to a confrontation that neither of them were prepared for. Karen walked briskly toward the front of the store, her eyes still glued to the man as he continued to browse the shelves. She could feel her heart racing in her chest, her mind working quickly, making a decision she felt was necessary. She didn't want to make a scene, but something inside her told her she had to act. She wasn't sure why she was so sure, but the idea that he could be doing something wrong kept growing in her mind. At the front counter, a security guard stood talking with another employee. He had just finished helping a customer and was casually standing by, scanning the room. Karen, still feeling uneasy, approached him. She cleared her throat, and the guard looked up, giving her a polite nod. "Excuse me," Karen began, her voice slightly shaky but firm. "I think you should keep an eye on that man over there," she said, subtly pointing in the direction of the black man, who was now standing near the back of the store, holding up a jacket. "I don't know, something doesn't seem right." The security guard raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond immediately. He glanced over at the man, then back at Karen. His expression was neutral, his years of experience in the store helping him keep calm, but he could see the concern in Karen's eyes. She was almost pleading with him to do something. The guard hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right, I'll keep an eye on him," he said, his tone nonchalant. He wasn't sure why Karen felt so strongly, but he was trained to ensure the safety of everyone in the store. He gave Karen a small, reassuring smile before turning toward the black man, walking slowly to keep his distance while still observing. Karen watched him leave, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. She had done what she thought was the right thing. Now, all she could do was wait and see if anything suspicious happened. She felt like she had done her duty, but deep down, she still felt unsettled. Her eyes darted back and forth between the man and the guard, feeling like the moment of truth was coming. Meanwhile, the black man continued to shop, unaware of the extra attention on him. He casually moved from one section of the store to another, still holding the jacket as he carefully examined it. To him, this was just a normal trip to the store, nothing more than a routine errand. But as he moved toward the checkout area, the security guard's eyes never left him. Karen, from her spot near the cosmetics aisle, watched the whole scene unfold. Her thoughts were racing, her assumptions clouding her judgment. She couldn't help but wonder if the guard would soon approach him, just like she had expected. She felt a sense of validation in her decision, but she also couldn't escape the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Had she made a mistake? Was she overreacting? It was too late to turn back now. At that moment, the security guard approached the black man, who had just placed the jacket on the counter, ready to make his purchase. The man smiled politely at the guard as he stepped forward, but there was a moment of awkwardness in the air. The guard asked if he needed assistance, his voice calm but firm, just as protocol dictated. The black man looked up, a bit confused, but nodded. Karen, still watching from a distance, wasn't sure what would happen next. She could feel the tension building in the air as the guard stood by, waiting for some sign that something was amiss. The security guard stood a few feet away from the black man, his eyes fixed on him. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he had his training to rely on. He noticed the man was still smiling, looking down at the jacket he had just placed on the counter, ready to pay for it. There was nothing suspicious about the way he was behaving, but the guard couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had been asked to keep an eye on him, and that's exactly what he was doing. The black man, still unaware of the extra attention, calmly turned to the counter and began to organize his items. He pulled out his wallet, preparing to pay, his actions relaxed and normal. He wasn't in a hurry. The store was quiet, with only a few other customers shopping around, and the faint sound of the soft music playing overhead added to the peaceful atmosphere. It was just another day for him, or so he thought. As the security guard observed, he couldn't find anything wrong. There was no hurried movement, no strange behavior. The black man was doing everything a regular customer would do. He was just like anyone else in the store, and yet the guard felt the pressure to act. He wasn't sure why, but he had been put in a position to watch. He cleared his throat and approached the counter, standing beside the man without saying a word at first. The black man noticed the guard now standing right next to him. He glanced up with a polite smile, not bothered by the extra attention. The guard, sensing a bit of discomfort, asked, "Can I help you with anything, sir? Are you finding everything okay?" His voice was calm, but it had an almost formal tone, the kind that made the situation feel a little awkward. The black man paused for a moment, taken off guard by the question. He hadn't expected to be approached so suddenly. His eyes scanned the guard's face, but he quickly returned his gaze to the items on the counter. "Oh no, I'm good," he said with a small chuckle, trying to ease the tension. "I'm just paying for this jacket, thanks." He pulled out his card and prepared to swipe it through the reader. But the guard remained standing there, not moving. The moment hung in the air. He wasn't saying anything, just watching. The black man's smile faltered a bit as he felt the weight of the guard's attention. His fingers brushed the edge of his wallet, but he couldn't help but feel slightly uncomfortable. What was this about? Why had the guard suddenly appeared right next to him? He had been in the store for a while, and this was the first time he'd been approached so directly. Karen, still watching from the aisle, felt a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. She had done what she thought was necessary, But now the scene seemed to be growing more complicated. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Perhaps a sign that her suspicions had been right, or maybe just an answer to the uneasy feeling that had settled in her gut. But as she stood there, her eyes glued to the situation unfolding, she could tell that the tension was starting to rise. The black man glanced around, feeling more eyes on him than usual, but he didn't let it show. He had experienced moments of discomfort before, especially in spaces where he didn't always feel welcome, but he refused to let this get to him. He was a paying customer, and he had every right to be here. Still, as the guard lingered next to him, a quiet frustration began to grow inside. He wanted to ask, "What's going on? Why are you standing here?" But he held back, deciding to finish the transaction first. He swiped his card, his eyes briefly meeting the guard's before he moved the card away. The guard, still silent, nodded briefly. It was a strange moment of silence before the guard finally spoke again, his tone almost like an afterthought. "Thank you," the guard said as the man took his bag and began to walk toward the exit. There was no apology, no explanation, just a simple sentence. The black man walked out of the store with his purchase, his mind still trying to process what had just happened. As he stepped out into the sunlight, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong, but he wasn't sure exactly what. The whole experience had left him feeling unsettled. Little did he know, back inside, Karen was still watching, waiting to see if her suspicions were truly justified. As the black man walked toward the exit, the atmosphere inside the store was filled with a strange tension. Karen, still near the cosmetics aisle, continued to watch him leave, her eyes fixed on his every move. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a strange sense of satisfaction, as if her instincts had been right. The security guard was still standing near the counter, watching the man as he exited, his expression unreadable. Karen stood still, her mind racing with thoughts about the entire encounter. The black man reached the door, his hand on the handle, but then he paused. There was something in the air. Something felt off. It wasn't the security guard. It wasn't the store itself. It was the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, his day hadn't gone as smoothly as he thought. He looked around once more, his gaze sweeping over the store, and then, without looking back, he walked out the door and into the warm sunlight. Outside, the street was busy with people walking by, cars passing, and the sound of distant chatter filling the air. It was the usual city noise that seemed to ground him in reality again. But as he made his way down the sidewalk, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had he been treated differently inside the store? He had shopped there before without any issues, but this time it had felt like there was something more to the interaction. Meanwhile, back in the store, Karen stood frozen for a moment. She hadn't expected to feel this way. Was she satisfied with the outcome? Her mind replayed the moment when the guard had approached the black man. She had been so certain, so sure that she was doing the right thing. But now, as the events settled in her mind, she wasn't so sure anymore. Was it really her place to judge him like that? Had she misjudged the entire situation? The security guard, now standing alone by the counter, turned and walked toward the back office. He had no idea that Karen was still thinking about the situation. He had followed protocol, nothing more. He had been asked to keep an eye on the man, and that's exactly what he did. But the interaction didn't sit well with him either. He had been trained to handle situations with discretion and professionalism, and he had done just that. But there was still something about the encounter that felt uncomfortable. He knew the man had done nothing wrong. There was no reason to stop him or question him, and yet he had followed Karen's suggestion. The security guard entered the back office and sat at his desk, thinking about the situation. He wasn't sure if it was the right call, but he had done his job. He could still picture the black man's face when the guard had approached him. The polite smile, the confusion in his eyes. It didn't match the suspicion that had been planted in Karen's mind. The guard sighed, pushing the thoughts away as he focused on his next task. Inside the store, Karen slowly made her way to the front counter, her steps hesitant now. She couldn't ignore the feeling that had settled in her stomach. She had acted on impulse, believing she was doing the right thing, but now she wasn't so sure. She thought back to the black man's calm demeanor, his polite response to the guard. Nothing had been out of the ordinary. She began to question herself. Had she been unfair? Was her judgment clouded by her assumptions? Karen looked around the store, her eyes scanning the neatly organized shelves, the well-dressed customers, and the staff going about their work. She had always felt at home in this place, always felt like she belonged. But today, everything felt different. She felt like an outsider in her own skin, unsure of the choices she had made. As she reached the counter, she realized that the store's manager had been watching the entire situation unfold from the back office. He had been aware of the tension between Karen and the black man. He had seen Karen's suspicious glances and the way she had walked to the security guard. He knew what had happened, and soon he would have to address it. He wasn't sure how to approach it, but he knew it couldn't be ignored. Something had to be said. The question was, how would he handle it? Karen stood there, the store's atmosphere now feeling heavy in charge. She wasn't sure what to expect next. Would she be confronted for her actions? Would she be asked to leave? All she could do was wait and reflect on the events that had unfolded, and wonder if she had truly done the right thing. As Karen stood at the counter, the store's atmosphere seemed to shift. The weight of her actions had begun to settle heavily on her shoulders. She glanced nervously around, her heart pounding. She had assumed she was doing the right thing, but now, as she replayed the entire situation in her mind, doubt crept in. She wasn't sure what she expected, but it certainly wasn't the heavy silence that seemed to hang in the air. It wasn't long before the store manager appeared, his calm demeanor contrasting with the storm of emotions Karen felt. He was a tall man, well-groomed, and always professional, but Karen could tell he had been watching everything unfold from the back office. His face showed no sign of anger, just a quiet understanding that came with years of experience. "Karen," he said gently, his voice steady, "I think we need to have a quick chat." His tone wasn't harsh, but it held a certain seriousness that made Karen's stomach drop. She had expected this moment to come, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to respond. She forced a smile, hoping to mask the unease building inside her. "Sure," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What about?" The manager motioned for her to follow him toward the back office. Karen hesitated for just a moment, but then followed him, her steps slow and heavy. She could feel the eyes of the other employees on her as she passed by, and it only made her more anxious. She wasn't used to feeling like this. Normally, she was confident, sure of herself, but now, everything felt off balance. Once they reached the back office, the manager shut the door behind them and gestured for Karen to sit. His eyes were kind but firm, and he wasted no time getting to the point. "Karen," he started, "I need you to understand that your actions earlier today weren't appropriate." He didn't raise his voice, but the weight of his words hit Karen like a punch to the gut. "You made a decision based on assumptions, and that's something we don't tolerate here." Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wasn't sure what to say. She hadn't expected this level of confrontation, but now that it was happening, she could see that she had made a mistake. She had acted quickly, without thinking, and it had caused unnecessary trouble. She had been so sure that she was right, but now she realized how wrong she had been. The manager continued, his voice calm but clear. "That man you flagged for security. He's the owner of the store. He comes in to check on things from time to time, just like any other customer. You assumed something about him based on his appearance, and that's not the way we operate here. We don't judge people by how they look." Karen's face reddened as she processed his words. She had never intended to cause harm or embarrassment, but her actions had done exactly that. She had been so quick to judge, so eager to act, that she hadn't stopped to consider the possibility that she could be wrong. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," Karen stammered, feeling the weight of the situation. "I just thought. I don't know. I thought something might have been off. The manager nodded, his expression softening slightly. I understand that you were trying to be cautious, but it's important to remember that assumptions can lead to mistakes. We all have to be aware of how our actions affect others, especially when it comes to something like this. Karen looked down at her hands, feeling a deep sense of regret. She had acted impulsively, letting her biases guide her instead of taking the time to understand the situation. It wasn't like her to make such a mistake, and she knew that she needed to do better. The manager sighed and leaned back in his chair. I think it's important for you to reflect on this, he said quietly. We all have room to grow, but we need to make sure we learn from these moments. I hope this will be a lesson for you. Karen nodded slowly, taking in his words. She felt a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. She wasn't used to being called out like this, but she knew it was for the best. She needed to learn from this experience, not just for herself, but for the people around her. As she left the back office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of heaviness in her chest. She had learned a difficult lesson, one that would stay with her for a long time. And as she returned to the store floor, she realized that it wasn't just about making amends for what had happened, but about becoming more aware of how she viewed others. This moment would stick with her, shaping her future decisions, and hopefully, guiding her to become a better person. The day continued, but Karen now saw the world around her through a different lens, one that was free of assumptions and full of understanding. As Karen walked back to the store floor, her mind was still racing, replaying the conversation with the manager over and over again. She had been caught in a moment of judgment, and it had led to a situation she hadn't expected. Her heart still felt heavy, but now there was a clear awareness inside her. The manager's words had struck a chord with her. She understood the importance of what he had said, and deep down, she knew he was right. She had acted on assumptions, and that had clouded her judgment. Now, all she could do was reflect on her actions and try to learn from them. She went back to her position near the cosmetics aisle, but the store no longer felt the same. She couldn't ignore the sense of discomfort that lingered, both inside her and around the store. The customers were still browsing, and the soft background music continued to play. But Karen felt more aware of everything now. She noticed the small interactions between the staff and customers, how genuine the smiles were, and how the conversations flowed effortlessly. She realized that all of this, the calm, the professionalism, the respect, was what the store was built on. She had disrupted that with her assumptions. Meanwhile, the black man who had been at the center of the incident earlier was walking down the street outside, heading toward his car. He had bought the jacket he had wanted, but the whole experience had left him feeling unsettled. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about the way he had been treated had made him feel out of place. He had been in this store before without any issues, but today had been different. It was as if he had been judged before he even had the chance to interact with anyone. As he got into his car and drove away, he tried to shake off the feeling of discomfort. He had dealt with situations like this before, times when people treated him differently because of the way he looked, times when he was assumed to be something he wasn't. It wasn't a new experience, but that didn't make it any easier. Still, he tried to focus on the positive. He had bought the jacket he had wanted, and he had done nothing wrong. He didn't want to let this one incident define his day. Back inside the store, Karen continued her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the man. She had seen him leave earlier, his steps purposeful, but there had been something in his expression, a brief flicker of confusion or maybe frustration, that she couldn't forget. She had made a mistake, and she knew it, but she also knew that simply acknowledging the mistake wasn't enough. She wanted to make things right, if it was even possible. After some time, the store manager walked by, and Karen caught his eye. She gave him a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of their earlier conversation. He smiled and returned the nod, offering a reassuring look. She appreciated his calm approach, but it didn't make her feel any less regretful. She had judged someone based on assumptions, and it had been wrong. As the day wore on, Karen's thoughts kept circling back to what had happened. She couldn't shake the feeling of having been unfair to the man. He hadn't done anything wrong. He had simply been a customer, just like anyone else. The judgment she had passed on him based on his appearance made her feel uncomfortable, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized how often people made similar judgments without ever thinking twice. It wasn't just about this one situation. It was about how people could so easily stereotype others without knowing their story. Karen knew that she couldn't change what had happened, but she could learn from it. She could be more aware in the future, not just of how others might see her, but of how she saw others. She wanted to challenge her own assumptions and make a real effort to treat everyone equally, no matter who they were or what they looked like. Later in the afternoon, the store manager approached her again. He was calm as usual, and Karen could tell he had noticed her thoughtful mood. He asked if she was okay, and Karen nodded, offering a small smile. She had been thinking a lot, and though she still felt the sting of her mistake, she knew it was a turning point for her. "I'm learning," Karen said softly, looking up at him. "I'll do better." The manager nodded in understanding. "That's all anyone can do. We all make mistakes, Karen. What matters is what we do next." As the store closed for the day and the lights dimmed, Karen felt a sense of resolution. She wasn't perfect, and she didn't expect to be. But she had learned something valuable today, something she would carry with her in the future. People's appearances didn't define them, and assumptions had no place in a world where everyone deserved respect. The next day, as she arrived at the store, she felt different. She was determined to approach every situation with more understanding, to really see people for who they were, not you. The next morning, Karen arrived at work with a renewed sense of purpose. As she stepped through the store's front door, she was greeted by the familiar sound of soft music and the pleasant murmur of customers chatting and browsing. But today, everything felt different. She was no longer going through the motions of her usual routine. The events from the day before had changed something inside her, and she knew she had to be more mindful, more aware of the way she interacted with people. Karen walked over to her usual spot, the cosmetics aisle, but instead of going through the motions of the day as she normally would, she began to observe her surroundings in a new way. She watched the customers coming and going, and she listened more carefully to their conversations with the staff. It was like a veil had been lifted from her eyes, and she could finally see things for what they truly were. She noticed the kindness in the staff's greetings, the way they took the time to listen to each customer, making them feel welcome and valued. It was the kind of environment that Karen had always appreciated, but had never really taken the time to understand fully. As the hours passed, Karen found herself reflecting on her own behavior. She thought about the way she had treated the black man the day before, how quickly she had judged him based on nothing but assumptions. She had let her own biases cloud her judgment, and that was something she could never take back. But she had learned something important from it. She had learned that her assumptions weren't just unfair, they were harmful. She had made someone feel uncomfortable for no reason at all, and that realization weighed heavily on her. Around lunchtime, the door opened with a soft chime, and Karen looked up, her heart skipping a beat. It was the black man from the day before, walking through the door with the same calm confidence he had shown the day before. This time, however, Karen didn't see him with suspicion or discomfort. Instead, she saw him as just another person, just another customer. He wasn't an outsider or someone to be wary of. He was simply a person, just like everyone else who walked through the store's doors. The man glanced around the store, casually walking toward the clothing section. Karen watched him for a moment, and then, without thinking twice, she decided to approach him. She wasn't sure how he would react, but she felt it was important to make things right. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to him with a warm, genuine smile. "Hi there," Karen said, her voice soft but friendly. "I just wanted to apologize for yesterday. I made a mistake, and I'm really sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable." The black man paused and turned to face her, his expression calm. He didn't seem surprised, but there was a slight hint of curiosity in his eyes. He had probably been expecting some kind of apology, but Karen could tell he wasn't angry. Instead, he gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "I don't think anyone's ever really apologized for something like that before." Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her, and she could see the sincerity in his response. It was a small moment, but it felt like a huge step forward. She had taken responsibility for her actions, and he had acknowledged it with grace. It made her realize that sometimes a simple apology could go a long way in healing a situation, even one that had started off on the wrong foot. "I just wanted to make sure you knew that it won't happen again," Karen added, feeling more at ease now. "I've learned a lot from this, and I want to do better." The man nodded, his smile widening a little. "I appreciate that. I can tell you mean it." For a moment, they just stood there, exchanging a quiet understanding, the tension from the previous day fading away. Karen realized how much she had grown in such a short time. What had started as an uncomfortable, judgmental moment had now turned into a chance for growth and connection. She had made a mistake, yes, but she had also learned from it and was taking steps to be better. As the conversation came to an end, the man went back to browsing the clothes, and Karen returned to her post. She couldn't help but smile to herself, feeling a sense of peace that had been missing earlier. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about the lesson she had learned and the commitment to change. She knew that she wouldn't forget this experience, and that it would stay with her as she moved forward in life. The day continued on, but Karen felt a renewed sense of clarity. She had made a mistake, but she had also made things right, and in the process, she had become a better person. The store's atmosphere felt more welcoming than ever, and Karen knew that her actions from now on would reflect that warmth and understanding. As the day drew to a close, Karen felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced a challenge, learned from it, and taken steps to make things right. The store was bustling with customers, but Karen was no longer just another employee going through the motions. She had experienced a personal transformation, one that had shifted her perspective on how she interacted with the world around her. Throughout the day, she had observed the way people treated each other, how the staff greeted each customer with kindness, how the conversations flowed smoothly, and how everyone seemed to fit perfectly into the rhythm of the store. Karen realized that the store's success wasn't just about selling products. It was about creating a space where people felt valued and respected, regardless of who they were or where they came from. She understood now that her actions could either contribute to that atmosphere or take away from it, and she had learned that it was always better to act with understanding and empathy. Later in the afternoon, as the store began to quiet down, Karen found herself reflecting on the conversation she'd had with the black man earlier in the day. The apology had been simple, but it had meant more than just words. It had been a moment of connection, a reminder that everyone was deserving of respect. Karen had expected him to be angry, to hold a grudge, but instead, he had accepted her apology with grace, and that had made all the difference. She felt grateful for that. His response had shown her that most people were willing to give others a second chance, as long as they were genuine in their intentions. As she stood by the counter, preparing for the store to close, she saw the black man one last time. He was near the door, his jacket in hand, ready to leave. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod, acknowledging their earlier conversation. Karen smiled back, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. She felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The man walked out of the store, and Karen stood there for a moment, watching him disappear into the evening light. She didn't know what the future held for either of them, but she knew that she had made a meaningful change in herself. That simple interaction, that brief exchange of apologies and understanding, had created a ripple of change in her life, one that would stay with her long after the day had ended. As the store began to close for the night, Karen started to clean up, putting away the last few items. The floor was quiet now, the the soft hum of the lights filling the space as the staff prepared to leave. But Karen felt a sense of peace in the stillness. The lessons she had learned had left a lasting impression on her, and she knew that she would carry them with her, no matter where she went. She looked around the store one last time before heading out. She had made a mistake, but she had also grown from it. And in that growth, she had found a new sense of purpose. It wasn't just about doing the right thing. It was about learning, evolving, and becoming someone who could make a positive impact, no matter the situation. As she left the store and stepped into the cool evening air, Karen felt lighter. The world seemed a little bit brighter, and she knew she was ready to face whatever came next with a clearer, more open heart. She wasn't perfect, and she would make mistakes again. But now, she understood the importance of learning from them and striving to be better. The night stretched out before her, full of possibilities, and with each step she took, Karen knew that she had started a new chapter in her life, one where understanding and kindness would guide her, and where she would never stop growing.